It's after dark. Do you know where your legal AF is? Speaking of AF, Donald Trump at one campaign stop just threatened to imprison Americans and other lawful immigrants in internment camps, suspend the Constitution, use the Insurrection Act to crush any kind of dissent. That means you and me exercising our First Amendment rights, and to use the Department of Justice to go after his enemies, anybody on that list. And that was just one stop on the campaign trail that we break apart and examine. Where else? Legal AF, the podcast. Take a listen.
Show the people what Donald Trump's been saying over the past several days as we get closer to Election Day. And then I want you to explain to our audience what the Alien Enemies Act is, also part of what's been referred to as the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. The historical context, but what it is that Donald Trump is saying. So right here, Donald Trump's giving this speech in Aurora, Colorado, where Trump lied and claimed that Venezuelan gangs have taken over all of Aurora and all of Denver, and that he needs to liberate it. And the messaging that he has now is America is an occupied nation that requires liberation based on the invasion of immigrants. That's what he's closing with. Here's what he said, though, about one of the ways he's going to stop an invasion that is not taking place. But play this clip.
To expedite the removals of these savage gangs, and I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Think of that. 1798. This was put there. 1798. That's a long time ago, right? To target and dismantle every migrant criminal network operating on American soil. Who would have ever thought that a president or a future president would ever have to stand here and say such things? Who would think that that's even possible to have to do?
Yeah, who would even think that it is possible that someone would be saying we need to go back to some of the darkest days that we learned about in law school and history class, and bring back that based on Donald Trump's lies that Colorado is now occupied and being taken over by gangs. That's not to say that there aren't issues that need to be addressed. Of course there are. And frankly, violent crime was higher under Donald Trump. But the framing that he creates is one also that he uses specifically these words invasion, occupy, because those are the language that's found in the Alien and Sedition Act. And that's what he's being advised by people like Stephen Miller in order to suspend our Constitution. Let me just show you one other thing that he said at that same speech, because part of the Alien Enemies Act and Alien Sedition Act is also involves shutting down the media if you criticize the commander-in-chief for the implementation of these steps to basically remove people or lock people up, round people up, throw them in camps on the basis of ancestry. You criticize them, you go to jail as the press under the Alien Enemies Act. Here, play this clip.
So they're asking, but think of this. So CBS gets a license, and the license is based on honesty. I think they have to take their license away. I do.
Donald Trump was too afraid to sit for an interview with 60 Minutes. He was too scared to sit down and be asked questions outside of his Fox bubble, where Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham will say to him, "Oh, so you're the funniest guy. You're the strongest guy ever." And Vice President Kamala Harris gave an interview, and now Donald Trump saying, I'm going to shut down CBS. He said he's going to shut down NBC. He said he's going to shut down Google because he doesn't like the searches that have mean stories about him. Popok, what's the Alien Enemies Act? What's the Alien Seditions Act? Yeah. How dangerous is it that he's just invoking that right now? As Vice President Kamala Harris says, let's go forward. Trump saying, you know what? 1798 is where we really need to be. Alien and Sedition.
Yeah, it is. Let me give the framework for this, and then I'm going to dive right into the Alien Enemies Act and the Alien Sedition Act of 1798. But it's all part of a pattern that we're watching play out, and we're calling out here on Legal AF and the MeidasTouch network. Recall that Donald Trump And this is in the Jan 6 report and in special counsel Jack Smith's superseding indictment against Donald Trump. And we're going to talk about more about that a little bit later. Recall that there was a now fateful meeting in the White House in December after the election, but before Jan 6, in which Sidney Powell, Overstock.com guy Patrick Byrne, Giuliani, and Donald Trump were actively considering suspending the Constitution, declaring martial law, and issuing an executive order that was drafted but not signed, but almost was, to seize voting machines as part of martial law and lifting of due process in the streets. That is chapter 1 of the book. Chapter 2 of the book is that when, and this is also in the Jan 6 committee report and also part of the evidence against Donald Trump that has now been more revealed in the filing by Jack Smith, is the conversation with Jeff Clark. Not Jeff Clark, DOJ Jeff Clark, but Jeff Clark being questioned by one of the aides for Donald Trump. And they said, if he doesn't do peaceful transfer, Donald Trump, and turn over the reins of power to Joe Biden as required on the 20th of January, there's going to be rioting in the streets. To which Jeff Clark very glibly and very callously, but very menacingly said, that's what the Insurrection Act is for. So they understand. Donald Trump may have fell asleep during social studies where he was taught, or history, about the U.S. Constitution, but he's been spoon-fed the worst parts of it to use against the American people. Let me make this clear. So I don't want to mince words. He's talking about using the U.S. Army and the U.S. military against Americans on U.S. soil in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. This is Donald Trump. He's talking about suppressing, crushing dissent in the streets of Americans exercising their First Amendment right under the use of the Insurrection Act. He's talking about suspending due process and habeas corpus, meaning that the ticket you have to get out of a secret prison and get brought before and arraigned before a judge. That's the habeas corpus proceedings. He would suspend habeas corpus and he would declare martial law. So you got troops running through the streets, right, in order for him to have, if he's ever gets anywhere near the White House again. Now, for me, standing on the shoulders of all of that terrible dictatorship, fascism, use of our Constitution and laws around it, is his declaration about the Operation Aurora, because he happened to be in Aurora, Colorado. And when you put up that clip, I mean, just look, it's not even subliminal. Just look at the messaging behind him. End migrant crime, right? Deport illegals now. Hashtag Trump, whatever. End migrant crime, that's a lie. Crime is committed in less percentage and less numbers by people who immigrate to this country, migrant or otherwise, than good old-fashioned Americans. And not by a little, by a lot. Sure, there's an occasional case that's terrible and traumatic about, some person not here on proper status without a driver's license that kills somebody. But multiply that by hundreds and thousands happens every day with people who aren't illegal immigrants or aren't here illegally. Deport illegals now. This is, again, they have no interest at all at a humane, dignified immigration policy. The Republicans, because they need it. They need to scare the crap out of people with the murderous migrant under your bed in order to get you to vote for them. Because if they allow free and fair elections, if they don't rip away or try to crush your right to vote with voter laws and hurdles and registration on voting, on counting and the rest, they'll lose. They'll lose every time if they just let the American people vote. But they don't want to do that. Now, this Alien Enemies Act, which I had to go brush off from yes, I learned about it in law school, and so do you, but I had to go brush up on it. Brennan Center did a nice job on it. The prerequisite for exercising a president's power under the Alien Enemies Act, which is to evict from the country foreigners who are in this country to be spies, or to be traitorous to the country. Right? You have to have a declaration of war, which only Congress, not the president, can declare. But before there's a declaration of war, the president is allowed, if there is an ongoing incursion into the country if there's let me just get the exact language. If there is a predatory incursion or an invasion, and those are terms of art that haven't been well defined, the president can act before getting the actual war declaration from Congress. So he gets in day one. He says there's an invasion going on and a predatory incursion. Now that's supposed to be where the enemy, the war enemy, has snuck into the country, like, you know, Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor, and that gives this power to try to expel them temporarily while the war power is exercised by Congress. And that gives tremendous power to the president, that they can put them in secret prisons. They can hold them there indefinitely without due process. They'll never see the light of day, and they can create internment camps. The Alien Enemies Act has been used 3 times in our nation's history, and they're all pretty dark, starting with 1812, the War of 1812, and ending with World War II. That was the last time it was used by FDR, of all people. And you and I learned about the Karamazov case, which is where the Supreme Court ultimately ruled that it was just fine under the U.S. Constitution and the Alien Enemies Act for a president to order the internment, meaning concentration camps, in America of other Americans. These were not Japanese here after Pearl Harbor who were, you know, spies. These were Americans, Japanese Americans, your neighbors, your friends, you in a concentration camp. And Donald Trump looks at that like the golden era. We should go back to that. You know, I found a new statute I can use. And you could see how he's not going to comply with any of the norms or the guardrails around the use of that power. So he knows what's in his bag of tricks should scare the crap out of everybody and get them to the polls to cut him off at the pass right away. All he knows is the Insurrection Act can be used to crush dissent in the street of Americans. He can use martial law to suspend the Constitution and the writ of habeas corpus and put Americans in jail. And the New York Times, I just was on with Judge Ludig, who joined us again for another interview that'll go up, I think, over the weekend. And I said to him, well, you were quoted, Judge, in a magazine article, the New York Times last week, in which they have a giant bullseye, which says if Trump gets back into office, this is his enemies list. He's going to use the Department of Justice and FBI to put people in jail, and everybody was listed there. I was looking for your name and my name, Ben. It wasn't there, but just barely. And you know what Judge Ludig told me? He said, yeah, that's going to happen. I have every belief and fear that if Donald Trump gets back into office, he will start jailing his political enemies. So you've got the Insurrection Act crushing Americans. Then you've got him believing that he can use U.S. troops, not the National Guard, state by state, which comes in for certain disasters or events. He's talking about using the U.S. military turning around and facing their cannons and their weapons at American citizens on American soil. That hasn't been allowed since the Posse Comitatus Act. So he's going to do that. He's going to be seizing voting machines and everything else he can do. Now, what is the solution for this? We're not just here to give a tutorial about some old-timey time 1798 law. This is all about crushing Americans, taking away Americans' right to vote, taking away their due process rights, and setting up Trump internment camps. If you don't want that, then not just vote on November 5th or now. Judge Ludig just told me he voted already down the ticket. Get other people to vote. Go to red states and help register. Finish up on registering. There's so much we have to do so that we don't say on November 6th, we didn't do enough.
Section 2 of the Alien and Sedition Act, which Donald Trump says that he will implement on day one, says the following: and be it further enacted that if any person shall write, print, utter, or publish, or shall cause or procure to be written, printed, uttered, or published, or shall knowingly and willingly assist or aid in writing, printing, uttering, or publishing any false, scandalous, and malicious writing or writings against the government of the United States, or either House of Congress of the United States, or the President of the United States, with intent to defame the said government, or either House, or to bring them, or either of them, into contempt or disrepute, or to excite against them, or either or any of them, the hatred of the good people of the United States, or to stir up sedition within the United States, or to excite any unlawful combinations therein, for opposing or resisting any law of the United States. And it goes on to say that they shall be charged and sent to prison and punished by a fine not exceeding $2,000 and an imprisonment not exceeding 2 years for each individual count. So you can say, well, then just don't say false things. Okay, but take a look, first off, who would be the arbiter of what a false and true fact is? Donald Trump uses alternative facts, in other words, lies. He still claims the 2020 election is rigged. So if you were to say the 2020 election was a free and fair election and it was not rigged, you go to jail. We go to jail. MeidasTouch Network, Legal AF, we would go to jail. If you say anything scandalous, and he would be the one to determine what is scandalous or malicious or something that would cause disrepute or excite against him reputational harm. Under this statute, he can invoke it and he can say, you know, CBS, you embarrassed me. And I'm trying to stop the invasion, and you embarrassed me. We're going to have to charge you. Our DOJ is going to charge you. And recently, J.D. Vance has said, I'll try to pull this clip up in a little bit, the most important person in a Trump administration is not going to be the VP. He goes, yeah, it's not me. It's going to be the AG, because Donald Trump will use the AG. And it'll be probably someone like Jeff Clark, and they will just go out and start prosecuting everybody. So I will be prosecuted. Popok will be prosecuted. CBS will be prosecuted. And all you will see is the Hannitys, the Ingrahams, the Greg Gutfelds, the Jesse Waters, and that type of people, your right-wing propaganda networks that will exist. And America will be turned into North Korea and Russia, and everybody will be jailed. And so it's a great point, Popok. This is not trying to scare you. Donald Trump said that he was going to invoke a specific law. This is a legal show. So I'm letting you know what that specific law actually says. You combine that with the fact that the Supreme Court has said that anything that Donald Trump does while he's in office, essentially, if it's part of his core constitutional functions or if it's deemed an official act, he has absolute immunity for. So as long as he says it, doesn't have to be true. There's an invasion. I have to stop the invasion. Total and absolute immunity. So can he order SEAL Team 6 under the Aliens Enemies Act, under the Alien and Sedition Act, under the Insurrection Act to kill us, to kill you? Yes. Is the short answer. Will he be absolutely immune from it? Yes, he would be absolutely immune from it. That's from everybody from Judge Ludwig to us. We'll say that that is what our Supreme Court has done. So again, what can you do right now? You call people in your family, you know, wherever they are, and make sure that they are registered to vote. Make sure that they have, if there's early voting, that they've done the early voting. Make sure their names haven't been purged from the voter rolls. Now is the time where you need to take action, because we read you the law, and we're going to read you more of this law and more of the plans. We're talking in this first part of the show about domestic. We're going to talk about international, Trump's plans with Vladimir Putin.
Welcome back. When we founded Legal AF 4.5 years ago, we didn't know that we would have to be the firewall, along with our audience, to protect our constitutional republic, but we are. We meet every week, twice a week, on Legal AF, the podcast, along with our community, our Legal AFers and our Meidas Mighty, watching us record it, then picking up our audio podcast recording. The ways to help us: listen to the show, watch the show, leave comment to the show, leave ratings for the show, and now we got a new way, a new progressive pro-democracy channel to pick up all of the excess and overflowing law and politics news. It's MTN times Legal AF, and we call it Legal AF MTN for MeidasTouch Network. I'm the chief curator and the producer of the show. I sit at the intersection of law and politics, so you don't have to. You like everything about Legal AF? You'll find it there on Legal AF MTN on YouTube. The podcast is there. Clips from the podcast is there. My hot takes are there. My original content is there. Contributions from Karen Friedman McNiffalo, Dina Dahl, a brand new show devoted to the United States Supreme Court called Unprecedented. I'm doing every week with Dina Dahl, and Court Accountability Action is with us in collaboration. 4 or 5 hard-hitting analytics every week courtesy of the #1 group devoted to corruption in the federal courts up to the Supreme Court in America, Court Accountability Action. Only on Legal AF MTN. Hit the subscribe button. We got to get to 200,000 before this weekend is over. I'm begging you. So until my next hot take, till my next Legal AF, the full podcast, Wednesdays and Saturdays, 8 p.m. Eastern on this YouTube channel. I'm Michael Popok, and I'm reporting. In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.